Welcome to the City of Huntington Beach Community Choice Energy Town Hall. My name is Mike Posey. I serve on the Huntington Beach City Council, and I'm honored to be your host tonight. Joining us will be the CEO of the Orange County Power Authority, Mr. Brian Probulski, consultant to the Orange County Power Authority, Gary Saliba, and legal counsel to the Power Authority, Mr. Ryan Barron. Tonight's topics, we're going to talk about community choice energy. How does it work? What is a local community choice energy, or a JPA? We'll cover some frequently asked questions. While we're here, just want to remind everyone that we're being rebroadcast on YouTube and Facebook, and you can also review this presentation just like it's presented from the city's website. So if you have other questions that can't be answered, please refer back to the rebroadcast and then email your questions to City Hall. Anyway, we have energy choices today, and we spoke about this at the City Council when we first started exploring this a couple of years ago. And right now, your choices for energy supply is an investor-owned utility, or IOU as it's called. In our case, in Huntington Beach, it's SoCal Edison, or you can use candles. So you have a choice. You really don't have a choice. You have a monopoly. You also don't have control over energy rates because there's no competition. So we began looking at community choice energy because it's been widely adopted throughout the state. There's probably 10, 12 million people in California that buy energy from a community choice aggregate or community choice energy. And we remember that the first one was Marin County that happened, I think, 21 years ago. How this happened in 2002, Assembly Bill 117 opened up the door for California jurisdictions to develop community choice energy programs, also known as community choice aggregation. CCEs are programs that allow local governments to purchase energy on behalf of their communities while still receiving transmission and distribution service from the existing utility provider. In our case, of course, that's Edison. Through a CCE, local agents can also become power purchaser for the communities, which introduces a new level of competition in the energy market and results in customer choice where there was none before. And I wanted to go back to that word competition. Not only does Edison have competition, Edison will be competition to the Orange County Power Authority. So we'll be working together with them delivering the power and us working on keeping our rates as competitive as possible. In the U.S., we value competition through fair capitalism or fair competition, and that's what I just sort of underscored. We don't think twice about promoting the competition, though, in the utility markets. Community choice energy is one prime example where we're allowing ourselves to think outside of the box, giving ourselves to provide you with the choice. And again, we need to emphasize the word choice. Under a CCE, you have the absolute right to opt out or back into the CCE. And that's really why I was an early supporter of community choice energy, was really because of that keyword choice. You have a choice of energy supply. Simple to stay with your existing investor-owned utility or make the switch. Here's a helpful visual on how it works. So it's real simple. Energy is produced either at solar, wind, hydroelectric, natural gas, whatever power plant provides the electricity, and it's transmitted from its power source into the grid and then distributed to you, the homeowner or your business, or even City Hall. And the metering is the same. So a couple key points to remember: community choice energy introduces competition to the energy market. Competition stimulates technological advances. The demand will stimulate more sources of energy, expansion of solar and wind power supply, and it provides our customers, you, the citizens and the businesses, a choice of who you want to buy power from. We founded, actually we joined, take that back, Irvine took the lead on this. Irvine was the catalyst for this getting started. Huntington Beach was one of the early adopters, along with Lake Forest, Buena Park, and Fullerton. So all 5 cities joined right at the last minute, which was we joined on December the 12th to participate in the first board meeting on December the 15th. And we're looking at adding quite a few cities as we move along. So, of course, the more cities, the more competition, the more people in, the better for everybody. So a little bit of history, how this started. Huntington Beach started looking at community choice energy quite a few years ago, but part of what we needed to do was to collect the data on power usage, which is the aggregated data. And with that aggregated data, we had to do a financial impact analysis to find out, do we have the load to justify becoming our own CCE as a city, as a standalone with the city of Huntington Beach? And the short answer was probably, but there was significant startup cost in doing that. So what we did was we kept in touch with our neighbors in our neighboring cities, and the city of Irvine really jumped on this right away and decided to start it and invite other cities in. The benefit, of course, of that, as we discussed on the December 12th City Council meeting, is that Irvine will be providing the startup capital in the form of a loan to the Orange County Power Authority, and they'll be paid back over the next several years through the revenue that it generates. So we'll be looking at, there is a deadline too for the 5 cities to opt out. So there is an opt out if they're, for instance, Lake Forest joined at the very end, and they're still evaluating. I'm pretty sure they're going to stay in. I'm actually 90% certain. But the opt out for cities has been extended to April the 1st. So how it works, we've covered. So what we would like to do now is introduce, we've got some panelists, of course, some speakers. Brian Probolski. Brian Probolski is the CEO of the Orange County Power Authority. We appointed him just a few weeks ago. He comes to us with extensive experience working as the general manager, CEO at Molten Miguel Water District, which is also a public utility, and enjoyed sometime 3 actual terms as chief of staff in the Orange County Board of Supervisors, and brings a wealth of municipal experience. We also have Mr. Gary Saliba from EES Consulting. Mr. Saliba and his firm has been involved in, I don't know, 10 or 12 or Power Authority or CCE startups. So he brings a wealth of experience and knowledge from his 10 or 12 startups. And also on the panel is Ryan Barron. He's legal counsel to the Orange County Power Authority, also with Best and Krieger. And he's also been involved in 10 or 12 startups. So at this point, I would like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Brian Probolski, who will.
Thank you, Councilman Posey, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you for everyone who's tuned in. I think you're going to learn a lot tonight, and we'll have some opportunity at the end of the program for questions. So stay tuned. At this point, I'm going to bring in Gary Saliba from EES, the elder statesman of our bunch, and he's going to give us a little more in the weeds on CC and some of the financing and more of how things.
Thank you, Brian.
Gary, go ahead.
And this is Gary. Posey noted in the last slide, the current utility model in Orange County is Southern California, and it's either generates or purchases the electricity. They transmit it to the customer through the poles and wires, and then they read the meters and send the bills. Under the CCE business model, that will change. The CCE will be responsible for the acquiring or generating the actual electrons. Edison will continue to transmit it to the house and read the meters. The CCE, though, at the home level, will also offer additional customer programs to help the customer minimize his electricity bill and use it more efficiently. How does the CCE operate? There are significant benefits associated with the CCE. The first one is local control over your power sources used at competitive rates. The CCE will be responsible for determining what percentage of the electricity the consumer purchases comes from renewable energy versus market energy. That's a choice which you don't have great choice in with Edison. Secondly, there'll be greater energy efficiency. The CCEs typically promote any number of programs to increase the efficiency with which you use your electricity. Lower greenhouse gases. The CCEs traditionally purchase more green energy than what Southern California Edison does. So the greenhouse emissions will go down. CCEs also sponsor what's called distributed energy resources, which is generation on site for the customer. They put in microgrids. They can support electric vehicle stations and solar installations at the home. And they, in the CCE model that we're looking at for Orange County, each city will have a choice as to what power supply options they use, i.e. how much green versus market purchases come to the consumer. As far as history of the CCEs, as Councilman Posey said, they've been around for some time now, and they're growing rapidly. You can see from the map, pretty much all of the coastal cities and counties are participating in CCEs. About 25% of the state is served by CCEs. The projections by the California Public Utility Commission is that roughly 85% will be within a CCE service territory by 2025. And the customers do have choice. Again, as Councilman Posey said, the customer can stay with the CCE. They can go back to Edison. So there is actual choice in this under the CCA model, which promotes competition and keeps rates down. Brian?
Thank you, Gary. Sorry, I'm just catching my my place here. So we want to talk now about the formation of the Power Authority. You heard a little bit of that history from Councilman Posey, but we are new. We are new to Orange County, but CC, as you heard now, is not new at all to California. The CC was formed at the in the end of 2020. COVID certainly slowed things down, and if we had had a few more weeks, I think we would have had more cities on board who are now looking to join in the later years. This is a once a year opt-in option, which comes at the end of 2021 again. All the cities in Orange County were invited to join. Irvine set the path and invited all the cities to join. And in the end, we have Buena Park, Fullerton, Huntington Beach, Irvine, and Lake Forest who have joined. This is an endeavor that takes some capital to get started. As you see, you've got some professionals in the background here making things happen, and Irvine has contributed the funds to provide the startup capital as well as collateral for the bank loans that are going to be required later on as the CC grows and begins to procure power. There are numerous goals that the Orange County Power Authority has to provide benefits to you, the residents of Huntington Beach and the other member cities. Choice is at the top of the list. You don't really have a choice right now, and once Orange County Power Authority begins serving you load, you will then have a choice to join the Power Authority, to leave the Power Authority, to come back to the Power Authority. Everyone will have an option at their control. We will also be able to lower energy costs for you compared to current Edison rates, and offer an opportunity to access more renewable energy sources, solar, wind, thermal, geothermal sources, which are not options right now, all the way up to a portfolio of 100% renewable at the choice of the individual consumer. Once we get Irvine taken care of on paying back the loans and get beyond our formation, we're going to have a lot of opportunities for economic development, for local projects that will be really driven at the local level, at the city level, and those are really exciting opportunities that will come in a few years. And finally, local control. Right now, your power decisions are made by unnamed people in Sacramento. Now it's going to be local. You'll have your city council member representing you on the board of the authority, and also making decisions about portfolio options for where the supply is going to come from and how that's going to go out to you. So from a status standpoint, the formation of this is the form of a joint powers agreement. So each of the cities has lent their authority to govern to the Orange County Power Authority, and that agreement is viewable if anybody wants to take a look. You can go to ocpower.org, and it's also posted on most of the city websites. That governs the relationship amongst the cities. At the end of December, we filed our implementation plan with the state, with the PUC. That's a very lengthy document, but also available for your download, and you could take a look at if you have any interest in reading that. We're currently in the process of adopting administrative policies, procedures, resolutions. Those are back-end things that shouldn't have an effect on you as a consumer. And as we look into the procurement of power, tightening up and finding out which cities are going to be final members, and we'll tighten up our 10-year pro forma and financial analysis, all which looks really strong at this point. So I'd like to, at this point, bring Gary back in to talk about some of the pro forma forecasts, generation information, and Gary, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you, Brian. The economic feasibility of a CCE is always key in everybody's mind. And our firm has done several feasibilities on this particular opportunity. We started over a year ago with the city of Irvine and did a 10-year pro forma financial forecast of what a CCA rate would look like compared to Southern California Edison. In the pro forma analysis, we take a look at what Edison's generation costs are, what market prices are going to be, resource adequacy, and the exit fees, all based upon the most recent California PUC orders. The results of the first study we did was about a 1 to 2% discount off the total bill. All of the debt and the required reserves should be accumulated in 6 or 7 years after starting, after which there'll be significant net income available for customer programs. We updated the initial analysis then last summer. It was peer reviewed by another independent consultant, and they concluded that the financial feasibility of the CCE was solid. Then we took a look at overall Orange County in a 10-year pro forma feasibility. About 3 months ago, as Brian mentioned, we updated that in the implementation plan, which was filed at the end of the year. And again, the results showed that the feasibility of a CCE in Orange County was good. It was financially viable. As far as details on the funding, we estimate that what we'll call the pre-launch requirements for funding, which would be from now until launch, which is anticipated in the spring of 2022, would be roughly $2 to $2.5 million. And those fees would take care of the consultants, the legal cost, all the setup costs for the infrastructure for the CCE, and some bonds that we have to pay to the Utility Commission and the California ISO. Those funds are available now to the CCE through the city of Irvine. After launch, there's going to be needs for additional cash, and that cash will go towards taking care of the difference between the payables and receivables timing for a CCE. CCEs have to pay their bills in roughly 30 days and don't receive revenues for 60. So there's a 30-day lag which has to be covered. In addition to that, there are some collateral requirements associated with buying power from third parties. Right now, we estimate the amount of that second tranche of funding to be roughly $13 million. That's contingent, of course, on what the final membership looks like. And as Brian mentioned, the city of Irvine has said they will post any collateral needed for the second loan or tranche of money. With respect to the schedule we're on, there's a lot to be done the next year between now and launch. The first quarter of this year, we're going to work on hiring the key consultants for the CCE. There are 3 consultants that are primary. The first is the power management consultant, and they will be responsible for issuing RFPs for power supply, negotiating contracts, and keeping track of the financials around the power procurement. The second would be a scheduled dispatch coordinator, and this entity would take care of the real-time operations of the CCE. The way utilities operate, you have to schedule your power to the Cal ISO a day ahead, and then within the next day, there are always true-ups because your forecasts are never exactly right. You might be a little long, a little short. This entity takes care of taking care of all the deviations from the initial schedule. And then the final one would be our data management and call center consultant. And as I mentioned, Edison reads the meters and has all the information about kilowatt hours and how much is billed. They have to transmit that over to the CCE, so the CCE knows what each customer is using. So when they get a call at the call center, they can pull up the customer records and determine how much the customer used and address that. So this first quarter, we're going to spend our time getting the key consultants on board. After that, in the power market, there's 3 commodities that you have to purchase. You buy your green power, your market power, and something called resource adequacy. And the resource adequacy has a long lead time for the commission regulations. And we're going to start working on acquiring and preparing to require resource adequacies in the second quarter of this year. Third quarter is going to be all about trying to get our actual power supply lined up. We'll put out an RFP for power supply, do bid evaluations, and determine what the least cost mix is for power supply to meet the policy of the board. Then starting next year, we're planning on launching the commercial and industrial customers in the spring of 2022 and the residentials in October of 2022. One of the requirements for a CCA is before launching, you have to give all your customers notice of the CCE launch 60 days ahead and another notice in 30 days ahead, allowing them to opt out of the CCE program if they don't want. Then subsequent to launch, there's another notice that goes out 30 days after launch and 60 days after launch. So in all, there's a 120-day period when customers can opt out of the CCE and go back to Edison if they so desire. So we have a busy year ahead of us. Brian?
Thank you, Gary. You know, Gary, while I have you here, I'm going to ask you one question. There's been a lot of people inquire about, you see this list, you see all these consultants, you see all this work that has to be done that's got costs related to it. Is that figured into the pro forma? Is that Edison savings that we've been looking at consider all of these costs?
Yes. In doing the pro formas, we take a hard look at what kind of costs are involved in startup. And as I mentioned, that's going to be funded initially by the loan we're going to get from Irvine, but we paid the loan back and all the interest and principal payments associated with that loan are included in the pro formas. So the savings that we're showing here are after all of these costs are paid back.
Fantastic. Thanks for clarifying that for everyone on the line. So at this point, we've looked at a lot of the feedback that we've received, that the city of Huntington Beach has received with the media conversations. We've assembled those into a set of FAQ slides here that will hopefully answer a lot of the questions that are pending and pent up. So we're going to go through those and hopefully pre-answer some of the questions that you may be thinking of. And then I think we're going to hand it back to Councilman Posey, and we're going to take some questions from the public that's on the call. I'm going to ask Ryan, who's our attorney, and we'll have the most specific ability on these questions to run through them. So Ryan, if you're able to jump in here, that would be great with our first question about rates being lower than the investor-owned utility.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Typically, community choice aggregators up and down the state see a 1 to 2% rate savings over their incumbent utility, whether it's San Diego Gas and Electric, SCE, or PG&E. That's pretty consistent up and down the state. And that does not maybe sound like a lot at first, but to the average resident, if you aggregate that over a period of time, the savings are considerable. If you are a residential user and you have a high air conditioning bill, or you heat your pool, those savings add up. If you are a commercial industrial customer in Huntington Beach and you're looking to relocate out of the city or back into the city, looking at your utility bill and fixed costs, 1 to 2% savings could be tens of thousands of dollars a month. So that's typically what we see. The next question that we often get is whether CCAs develop new renewable resources. Someone hit the next slide, please. A lot of the things that community choice aggregators are doing is building in-state generation rather than importing power from out of state, although there is a fair amount of power that needs to be imported from out of state. To date, we've seen community choice energy develop about 6,000 megawatts of new renewable energy in California. And we're going to see even more coming online beginning in 2023. That's a considerable amount given the average project is 20, 30, 100 megawatts, maybe a little bit over that, 1 to 200 megawatts. It's quite a bit of power that's been built since CCEs have been in existence since 2010. Another question we get is focused on local component and do community choice aggregators create new jobs? One of the goals of this joint powers agreement, as well as a lot of all the other joint powers agreement, is not only local control, but regional job development. And as CCEs are looking to staff up, hire firms to advise them, put in new power projects in Southern California and regionally, there's an emphasis on generation that is local and that is regional. We also look at community programs such as electric vehicle charging stations, net energy metering, and a lot of that money flows back into the community through jobs, back into businesses that can provide those services. One of the questions we got in the process is, will the JPA customers be offered choices in their power supply portfolio? That's just a fancy term for the power that the JPA is going to go buy on their behalf. A lot of customers are interested in going, quote, green and being able to buy 50 or 100% renewables over what they can get through Southern California Edison. Think of this like a cable subscription package where you can sort of get your basic, Hulu channels or opt up into sort of your premier channels. Customers of the JPA will be able to go above what state law requires, which is currently 34% renewables, and be able to buy 100% and pay a slight premium over that. However, customers will not be forced to buy higher than what state law requires. So cities in the JPA can set their requirement, and each and every customer therein can buy only what state law requires, and that's currently 34%. So this allows the flexibility for those folks to stay at the lowest cost energy product, only buy what is absolutely required by the state, and allow those other customers to opt up, and allow other cities, if they have greater climate action plan goals, to achieve those goals if they want to, without any board forcing one member to opt into one particular product, or forcing any city or customer to do that. The number one question I get as legal counsel is, what is the liability to member cities? The JPA agreement is very clear that the debts and obligations and liabilities of the JPA are not those of the members. And typically a city will join a JPA in order to shield liability away from its general fund. So when we're talking about the purchase of energy contracts, any sort of liabilities that result from that, or other types of contracts or liabilities, those will not be the liabilities of a member city. So, should the JPA dissolve, should something happen, so an energy contract not be hedged properly, all those liabilities will go back to the JPA and not the members. And that's been proven up several court cases in California law. If a member were to withdraw, then there's a duty by the JPA to work with that member on any of the outstanding energy contracts that have been procured on its behalf, and mitigate those costs to ensure that they do not come out of the member's general fund, but they can be paid for by repair revenues. Another question we've been asked in Huntington Beach is, who sets the rates for the community choice aggregator? If you're a current SCE customer, the rates are set by the Public Utilities Commission. And it's very difficult for the average Joe like myself to go up there and challenge those rates or call a Senate and negotiate. Those go through a very, very time-consuming, very expensive process. Medicine rates are set throughout the service territory, from Bakersfield on down to South Orange County. Here, the beauty of a community choice aggregator is local control, where your board of directors, including board member Posey, will set the rates across the communities. And those ratepayers that have questions or issues can petition the JPA board and the JPA staff directly, because they're right down the street, and they have direct recourse back to the local government and not have to go through the rigorous processes of the state, which is usually not responsive to individual ratepayers. Another question we get is, are renewable energy costs increasing? We've seen energy prices come down from the mid-2000s, where they were $100 or $200 a megawatt, down to roughly half of what they even were 5 years ago, and they're projected to decline. We're seeing costs in the $20 per megawatt range for solar and wind. So pricing is very attractive, particularly for a startup energy joint powers authority that's going into the market right now. How does the authority operate, and how will it be administered? Currently, the board has selected a chief executive officer and a chief operating officer. So there'll be a staff of 2 individuals in 2021, which will ramp up to around 5 individuals in 2022. At full build out, the authority could have approximately 10 employees, all qualified in what they do and specialized in everything from customer care to power procurement. The governing body will be the Orange County Power Authority Board of Directors, where there is 1 director from each of the member agencies, with the exception of Irvine, who is funding the operation, who has 2 seats on the board until that capital loan that he has described is fully repaid, likely to be in the next couple of years. Why do CCAs, how can they beat utility rates? Well, utilities don't have incentives to sell you power. Power has been decoupled in California for a number of years. And so utilities get paid based on rate of return regulation, where they file their rates at the state, file their capital investment costs, and then they're guaranteed a rate of return. California is also an anomaly in that it has 3 of the largest investor-owned utilities in the United States, whereas most states do not have entities like Edison that are so large. So they aren't very nimble as monopolies, extremely bureaucratic, and have just have to buy power. Although they have a lot of buying power, the rates they set are across a very large region and sub-region. Whereas community choice aggregators have been more nimble. They've been able to buy generation or build generation through tax-exempt financing, and they have extremely low overhead costs, where even a large entity like LA only has about 40 employees. The question we get, and I believe this is my last slide, do CCAs utilize renewable energy credits? The state of California has largely phasing out the purchase of RECs only when they're decoupled from buying power. So as someone who buys power on an active basis in the market from my clients, we're required to buy a certain percentage of renewable power in state and a certain percentage out of state, where the power and the renewable credit come together. The state of California has not allowing just only the purchase of RECs by load-serving entities, and is phasing most of that out. So CCAs are largely not buying power in that way.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ryan and Gary, for running us through that. I think we covered a lot of information here, and we still have about 25 minutes remaining. So we're going to hand it back to Councilman Posey and see if we can't answer some live questions as they come in.
Yes, thanks, Brian, for handing it back. I do have a couple of questions. I've got some that I'm actually getting emailed from some of my friends and neighbors. And one of the ones that I keep hearing about is the issue of the opt-in, opt-out, and how once the JPA is running and we're selling power, and we opt everyone in, and they have the option to opt out. Maybe, I don't know if it's Ryan or Gary could explain the process, and is there a cost to any customer if they choose to opt out or opt in? How does that work?
Gary, you want to take that?
Gary?
Start with
Sure.
the notice.
Yeah, as I mentioned, when we launched the CCE, there's a notice 60 days ahead and 30 days ahead, and then 30 days after and 60 days after launch that the customer can opt back to Edison. And that can be done with no charge. After the customer gets in with the CCE, there is a notice provision. It varies, but it's roughly 6 months. When they can go back to Edison, and they have to pay, if it's a residential customer, it's a $5 reentry fee. For a commercial customer, it might be $25. Then if they do opt back into SCE, they have to stay with Edison for 12 months before they can go back to the CCE. So the process to opt out is fairly painless.
It sounds like it, and thanks for re-emphasizing that. Just to underscore that, it's 60 days advance notice and 60 days post opt-in notice, and then after 120 days, it might cost $5 to go back to Edison.
Correct.
So, that's great. So virtually, really, there's no financial impact with a 120-day notice. When we look at and I'll get to some of the we have some questions here. When I look at the board setting the rates, I know there's a lot of concern that rates are going to be set by city council members and they can do anything that they want. But we really can't. We're constrained by market forces, and that if we want to maintain a competitive advantage, we have to have competitive rates. What has been, since Gary, you've been on 10 or 12 startups on CCEs, what has been your experience with boards of directors with respect to managing the rates and managing to stay competitive? Are they staying competitive with their investor-owned utility?
Yes, they are. But what my experience has been with the CCA board members is that they are city council people or county supervisors typically, but they're very sensitive to the business aspect of it. And when we do budgets for them, the budgets always end up with a rate reduction, or they change the budget somehow. So we have seen the CCE stay competitive in all situations up and down the state that we know about.
Well, I think, and thank you for that. And I remember we spoke about this at one of the board meetings, and Ryan touched on it as well. And that is the competitive landscape for municipalities to attract businesses. So there's a couple of things to think about. If you're a large business that uses a lot of energy, and let's say it's manufacturing, you have a lot of machinery to power, and you're evaluating cities, and you look at, let's say, Huntington Beach as a choice, and Huntington Beach is part of the Orange County Power Authority JPA, and we can offer 1 or 2 percentage points less cost for energy. And that CEO of that company and their CFO, they're doing their spreadsheet analysis and spreadsheet comparisons as they evaluate where they want to locate that manufacturing facility. That might give us a competitive leg up. Would that be a fair statement, Ryan? Is that kind of what you were intimating?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I worked in Orange County where they had a, multi-million-dollar a month Edison bill, and we were constantly looking to ways to self-generate or reduce our power bill. And so one of the attractions of CCA, if you be 1 to 2% below the incumbent, which almost all of them are, you can attract large institutional customers. So for instance, we have a client Riverside where they want to bring in a big box retailer and offer them a special rate to come to their city instead of the city next to them. A lot of logistics facilities moving into that area. And so when you look at cities like Irvine, Huntington Beach, Point Park, that are all members of the JPA that have fairly decent sized commercial industrial bases, it's a great way to market themselves and attract those customers and keep businesses in those cities.
Yeah, and the other part of this too is the ability for a commercial industrial power customer to check the menu and say, they're 34%, 50%, or 100% renewables. And I would imagine that there would be an attraction to a manufacturing company or other industrial company that may want to be more environmentally conscious and environmentally friendly and choose that 100% renewable option. And I know with both legs of that three-legged stool, I guess, the competitive pricing and the choice, and then of course the choice of renewables, it's a real attraction. And Mr. Probolsky and I were privileged to have a Zoom conference with a large energy user that inquired about getting early on and early in on the Orange County Power Authority and we discussed both of those issues, competitive rates, and then potentially being 100% renewable. So as a city council member involved in economic development, this gives us really another tool in our toolbox to help attract businesses. And then a couple other questions I have too that I just got sent to me. I know we covered how we're funding the Orange County Power Authority. And so Gary, this is for you. since Irvine is providing the startup capital in the form of a loan to the Orange County Power Authority, and let's just focus on Huntington Beach because this is the Huntington Beach Town Hall. Huntington Beach's investment was around $70,000 for the feasibility study. Does it look like the city of Huntington Beach will be dipping into the general fund to do anything more with the Orange County Power Authority? Or is it just really up to us to get customers into the Power Authority?
I think it's the latter. The cash requirements to get the CCA going and the collateral for the subsequent loan have been covered by the city of Irvine. And that should be the extent of any cash calls for any of the members in the JPA.
So that answers my second question is about Huntington Beach taxpayer dollars. And we know taxpayer dollars aren't being spent to fund the Orange County Power Authority. They're going to be funded by ratepayers, and ratepayers already pay for electricity. It's just that they're going to be paying a different entity instead of an investor-owned utility. They're going to be paying the Orange County Power Authority should they choose to stay in the Power Authority. So it's really, it's not tax-based funded. It's ratepayer funded. Is that about summarize it pretty well, Mr. Saliba?
Yes, it is. There's no property tax responsibility going to the CCE whatsoever. All the CCE debt and expenses we paid for by the power bills that the CCE customers pay to the CCA.
And I know you covered this a little bit earlier. Exactly what is a joint powers authority? Is it another government bureaucracy? Is it a quasi-government bureaucracy? What is a JPA, and how do we address the fear that this is a government getting into the business of providing a utility?
That might be a good question for our attorney.
Okay, there you go. Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the law says a city, a county, or a group of cities or counties through a joint powers authority can form a CCA. And, you know, a joint powers authority is a local government. It's an entity that is created by a bunch of cities that have a common interest in providing a regional service. And in this case, they do it not only to provide the regional service and do so for economies of scale and efficiencies, but also to insulate all of themselves in higher risk activities, right? Like energy or flood control or things or trash. So that doesn't affect their general funds and liabilities don't come out of that. The DPA is also set up so it's a borrowing tool. It can go out and construct things. It can finance things. It can issue debt. And none of that goes back to the members. And so a JPA is a government entity, but it does not have to be another big bureaucracy. What we've seen with community choice aggregators is they have low staff. They don't carry they don't tend to carry your CalPERS pension obligations. They have 401 type retirement plans, and they are in a sense a market-based government because of the competition. If they don't have lower rates, if they don't have better programs in the IOU, they have to have those things in order to compete and survive. Whereas your traditional joint power authority is providing a service that there is no real competition for.
And that's a real good summary because, you know, cities all over Orange County are members of numerous JPAs, and for the city of Huntington Beach, we're obviously a member of Orange County Mosquito and Vector Control, which is a JPA. We're members of Orange County Sanitation District, which is a JPA. We're like you said, as cities have common interest, pool their resources, pool their buying power, pool their customer base to regionalize the service. So that's exactly what the Orange County Power Authority is. So thank you. Then how do we ensure and I'm sure this applies just like it does at Vector and sanitation and other JPAs, concerned about transparency and accountability. And I know with the board, we'll be doing that. We're certainly going to be transparent. But what can you tell the viewers watching how we will be held accountable financially and with transparency? And that's probably for Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, council member. The Joint Powers Authority and the Board of Directors is held to the exact same standards as all city and government officials are. So you have Brown Act, which governs that all meetings have to be open and transparent and subject to certain notice requirements, say 72 hours ahead of time. There's the Records Act applies. So most all the records that the JPA keeps from their contracts are open and have to be disclosed to the public. Deliberations are made in the open unless they're subject to some sort of closed session exemption. You have all the trappings of government are there to protect, ensure the public can see what the rates are, see how rate setting is made. The government code has a lot of provisions about how local governments are to maintain funds in local depositories, and the treasurer having higher duties under the law to safeguard those funds, which apply to the Joint Powers Authority. So, this isn't a private company that has closed books, that can have board meetings privately. Records don't have to be disclosed. All of this is subject to California transparency and open meeting laws.
I'd like to jump in here for a moment on this and add that the transparency, it really exceeds those of other governments, because it boils down to a line item every month. You're getting a bill, you're getting to see what you're being charged, you're getting to see how that compares to the investor-owned utility. That's ultimate transparency, and you don't have a choice to opt out of Huntington Beach unless you want to move. You have a choice to opt out of the Power Authority or opt into the Power Authority and see it in numbers on a bottom line that affects your household and your family. And I think that's the ultimate transparency. Of course, there's all the back end of public meetings and public budgets and all of that information available. But it really comes down to how does it affect you and your family or your business, and you're going to know that on a monthly basis.
And that's for sure. We've had, I think, probably 4 or 5 board meetings since December the 15th. We're kind of on the fast track and having a meeting every 2 weeks. And we do have public speakers call in. We do follow the Brown Act to the letter. Ryan is there keeping us right in line. And the agendas are posted with proper notice with all the attendant documentation. So, everything's there for the residents and businesses to find out more about the Orange County Power Authority. And the meetings are open to the public, not physically open right now. They're open to the public for calling in. At some point, maybe, we'll see what happens with the tiers as we go from purple on down, and when we can resume in-person meetings. But, maybe we'll be able to host meetings and have speakers come in person, maybe spring, summer, I don't know. I have no idea. And then the last question, and it's really kind of sort of been answered, I guess, is how can we deliver lower rates or predictably lower rates when we still have overhead with salaries and benefits and bricks and mortar, customer service people? Aren't we replicating what the AIU has and essentially doing the same thing? Where is the savings coming from? Is it coming from not paying shareholders, or where does the savings actually come from? And maybe Gary is probably the answer answer for that one.
I will start, and my colleagues will probably chime in. But you're right. The investor-owned utilities have to pay income taxes. They have to pay property taxes. They have to go to the taxable market to borrow funds, and the CCAs aren't burdened with any of that. There's no tax liability to the feds or the states or locally. They can access taxes and financing, which is quite a bit cheaper than what Edison has. For example, Edison's cost of capital runs around 8%, and the CCE can finance for roughly 4%. And
Wow.
the utility business is a capital-intensive business, so the advantage of no income taxes and taxes and financing are huge when you're talking about developing a power project.
And another question I just got texted to me. With our, and Ryan mentioned this earlier about not importing power, but having it more domestic, which would be in state, and knowing what, of course, land cost in California and really the cost of doing business in California. There are new technologies coming. And one of the technologies that I've been made aware of is solar panels floating on bodies of water like reservoirs. What other technologies are you guys aware of that can better utilize the space that we have in California, knowing that land is expensive? And is there? And we know that renewable energy costs are coming down. So as they come down, are there any technologies that you guys know of? I know it's kind of a trick question, but what's coming in the future?
I think in the solar industry, the technologies continue to improve. They're doing two things. One is they're changing the curvature of the solar collectors to make them more efficient, and the production costs are coming down markedly as the demand goes up. The price has been coming down on that, which makes it very efficient to put in solar. And you're right, they're finding all kinds of clever places to put solar, which they hadn't thought of. Storage reservoirs for water utilities have become very popular. You've probably seen a lot of the rooftop parking places have solar they're going in where you can maximize the utilization of the space by putting in solar like that. There is no end to the creativity, especially in the solar area. On the wind side, what they've done is they're making the wind turbines bigger. The blades used to be 50 or 60 feet. Now they're making them 150 feet. And they're much more efficient than what they were 10 years ago. So we see nothing but good on the horizon as far as pricing for renewable energy.
Yeah, and we've seen, my wife and I took a trip to Europe a couple of years ago on a cruise, and we noticed a lot of wind turbines actually out in the ocean. So you can't do much as far as land development in the ocean, but there were a whole lot of wind turbines out in the ocean there, and a lot of solar and a lot of the embracing of renewable energy. So we see that that's really our future. The city of Huntington Beach has solar coverings on the parking lot, so it gives a double benefit. It gives you shade in the summer and rain protection in the winter, and you generate electricity. And in our basement, we store some of that electricity in batteries. And so we're looking at more and more ways so we can utilize real estate to generate power, and while at the same time reducing our carbon footprint and reducing greenhouse gas emissions and making California a cleaner, and Huntington Beach a cleaner, better place to live. And at the same time, saving our customers, which is our citizens and our businesses, some money. So the Orange County Power Authority is on its way. We've started, and we're looking forward to getting more cities. And maybe if you wanted to wrap up, Brian, on any conversations, you don't have to name any cities, but what are your goals and objectives for cities for 2021? How many more cities do you think we're going to get?
Well, I think if 2020 had been 8 or 10 weeks longer, we probably would have had 10 than we had 5. So I think we've got a good 5 to 10 right now in the wings who are interested, that are talking to us, and I would expect that we would double our membership in next year and probably reach half of the county within 3 to 4 years.
Terrific. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Gary. And thank you, everybody behind the scenes that put this together. And thank you, citizens of Huntington Beach and from wherever you were at that tuned in. Please be sure to get back to us on if you have any more questions. And this broadcast will be posted on YouTube, Facebook, and on the city's website for future reference. So thank you and good night.